Hello and welcome to another episode of Talk'n TRM, the podcast dedicated to travel risk management. Now, over all of our episodes, I've always described all of my guests as friends or people I've got to know during this time that I've spent getting into this subject matter. But this particular gentleman, I think, features in probably at least 50% of our podcasts, at least by name. He's one of our biggest fans, and it's taken me, I think, 2.5 years to get him to actually do this because he's actually incredibly humble. He's a great public speaker. He's got a lot of experience, but he has just been a little bit shy on this, which is crazy because he's just got so much more to give. And there's what I'd like to get to today is the kind of, as we do on these podcasts, the man behind all of what he does on TV and all of his tips and useful things, and actually what got you here, and really to kind of help other people on their journey, because as we've shared many times, there's so many ways into travel risk management, and actually most of us have a personal journey. So I think we're going to touch on that today. So without further ado, in fact, no, I will say one more thing. If there is one person that has guided me and been my shining light through my journey through travel risk management, is this man. So I would say thank you to you. You're right up there with Bruce and Patrick, despite you perhaps thinking you might not be. But I speak to you almost every week, and you have supported me more than you'll ever know as a friend, and I'm so grateful. So it is my absolute honour, drum roll, if I had one, to welcome this detective Kevin Coffey onto my show. Hello, Kevin. How are you?
Hello, Bex. It's been a long time since we've talked about this, so here we are today. So looking forward to it for you, and most importantly, is for the followers that you have, because that's why you created this, and that's the only reason why I've agreed to do this, is to help others, and you'll hear about that as we go forward.
I know. I've had to really cajole you into doing this. So let's get started because we've got a lot to cover. So obviously I've just introduced you by name, but if you could tell the audience a little bit more about who are you and what do you do, Kevin?
Well, where do we start? As a matter of fact, we spoke about this morning. It's trying to give an idea. So this is not like I'm going out on stage or anything, but I think it's really important to kind of put this in perspective for this type of audience. So I'm going to kind of give you my elevator speech that when I'm talking to other professionals, and especially within organizations. So I consider myself, and you can see it on the screen there, a travel skills and meeting risk trusted advisor and people risk management evangelizer. Kind of long, but it kind of really touches all the different areas that I've been in and I'm currently working in this stage of my life. If you were to put this down in a nutshell, I help organizations and associations better train their travelers to avoid mishaps. I help organizations expand their travel and people risk management solutions using internal resources, something that Bex, you and I have always kind of just preached about, as well as their departments and their personnel at their highest level. Lastly, I work in the area of supporting and addressing meeting and event risk management, where I train meeting professionals to address meeting and event risk, usually for sub 1,000 attendees, because it's an area that a lot of organizations don't put a lot of training and effort into for their meeting and event planners. So in a nutshell, that's what I'm doing today. But of course, it was a long journey, over 30 years to get where I am today.
Kevin, thank you so much for that. That was certainly a wide variety of the things that you're covering now. And I think that is part of the conversations that you and I are always having, is that travel risk management touches so many different areas. And ultimately, we're talking about helping organizations become more prepared and people to become more prepared to avoid some of those things that can happen again and again. So what we're not talking about necessarily the crisis side of things. We're actually talking about the everyday travel kind of things. So I just want to, for our listeners' sake, because I know quite a lot about you, I'm very lucky to have asked you loads of questions, but I really want to kind of go back a bit. Can we just sort of talk about some of your first roles and how you got to what you're doing today, please?
Yeah, a long time ago. So I worked 35 years for the Los Angeles Police Department. I was a young detective and was working up in Hollywood back at the time, and I was investigating pickpocketing cases on Hollywood Boulevard, Grauman's Chinese Theater. I also well, God, way before that, I was a footbeat cop on Hollywood Boulevard and would deal with tourist issues. So at the time when tourists would fall victim to pickpocketing and related and car break-ins of their rental cars, I never really understood the impact it was on the travel industry itself and on travelers. I just looked at it as just another victim because I was young. I didn't know. It wasn't until I made the rank of detective and I came, back into the building, started investigating those crimes that I was writing the police reports on, and I started to understand and hear the devastation that could hear to travelers. Still didn't really get it, didn't know it, because a lot of times when you're young, we don't understand what the direction, what door is going to open up for us. Then I transferred out to the west side of Los Angeles, and I worked in one of the police divisions that encompasses Los Angeles International Airport. And at the time, we didn't have an investigative unit that specifically focused on crimes that were committed against travelers at LAX Airport on the investigation side. I started that up and started taking a look at these types of cases, which always interested me from another aspect. A lot of the detectives didn't like working on these cases because a lot of the victims were international. They didn't speak English. They flew back to another state, another country. And back in the early years, it was one of the requirements out here in Los Angeles that victims had to be able to confront their accusers in person. So they had to fly the suspect back or fly the victim back for the court case. And it was very expensive on a pickpocket case, a luggage theft case related. But that's what started my career there. I was doing as a detective, doing regular detective work, working undercover at LAX Airport, going after all types of crimes that would occur there, from luggage theft and baggage claim to theft in the airport terminals to theft in the first-class lounges, thefts that would happen on the airplane, and working with the FBI because it was an international case for the FBI to work on, but worked with us jointly. Employee theft, pilferage, dishonest employees, luggage handlers going through people's luggage. And then that always transferred over to other areas. I had other detectives saying, "Hey, Kevin, you're the travel detective guy. Why don't you take over the crimes that occurred at our hotels surrounding the LAX airport and car rental agencies?" So next thing, I started taking in all these cases and started to kind of really take a look at the sophistication that some professional thieves were using to target victims. And what really kind of brought it all together, and again, I was still a young detective at the time, ended up with a man that came into my office, and he was just visibly shaken. He was an older gentleman, what I am today, where I was in my late 20s, early 30s, I think. And he was just shaken, and it was just, he was in a sport coat related, and he was anxious. And he proceeded to tell me that he had been traveling into Los Angeles, and he had sat his carry-on bag down. And as he was going through some paperwork, and as he turned around, somebody had stolen his carry-on bag. And inside the carry-on bag had his laptop, had a bunch of presentation materials. And normally, I would see these cases every day, but what he proceeded to say, and was so anxious, is that he said he was en route now to go see a client, that he had to do a presentation, and the client had to make a decision that day on what they were going to do. And he said, "I couldn't do it. I didn't have my deck. I didn't have my laptop. I didn't have my materials." And he said, "We're probably going to lose this entire contract." They were a large gear manufacturing company. And then the guy said, "I've traveled so much, I can't believe this has happened. No one's ever told me about this. I never heard it." And then we was hoping that there was some way I could, magically make his carry-on bag appear. Of course, it never did. But he was so shaken, and that's when it really hit me on the impact it can really have on travelers. And that's where it kind of started. And then I'll never forget it. The phone rang one day, and it was the local TV crew from our local NBC affiliate, and wanted to do a special on how to help travelers reduce issues when they travel through the airport. I did that. It was a 3-part special. Nobody wanted to do it. Nobody wanted to be on television as from the police department with the news media back then. That went on, and then I got a phone call one day from Harpo Productions, which is Oprah's production company, and I did her show several times. And next thing you know, my career took off in a direction I never dreamed of.
Well, that's something we've absolutely got to get into, because I think that's what's so interesting again about travel risk management. You kind of start in one place, and you
No,
didn't even know about travel risk management when you first started this. That you were thinking of it much.
wasn't a word. Wasn't a word.
Wasn't still people. I'm not sure are convinced they know what it is now, Kevin. But we're getting there. Things have changed, but I really want to dig back into. So you mentioned a couple of things there, and I think obviously when you're doing the role that you were doing, you're frontline and you're dealing with people who have been robbed. I'm guessing there are other crimes as well. It's not obviously there's a lot of different types of theft and burglary. But other things, cyber. Did you kind of get into cyber things at all? Were there any sort of harassment cases or any, dare I say, sexual situations or anything like that, or was it primarily theft that we were dealing with?
Yeah, so most of the work I did when I was a young street cop on Hollywood Boulevard back then, and the majority of issues when they happen that involves law enforcement, it's going to be the loss or theft of items. It's either from your pockets, or it's your luggage or carry-on bags, or it's your rental car. Those were the most typical areas that victimization would occur. Of course, then there's other sub-areas, subsets, like the theft on board the aircraft. When I show my videos on theft on board the aircraft, people are just amazed that this stuff even goes on. But the areas that would have more impact, but thankfully it's a very, very small amount, is that when I would investigate the crimes against travelers at our hotels, this was usually, again, the theft of property, in the lobby area, the theft in the meeting and event rooms and spaces. It's amazing people that are still unaware the amount of theft that goes on in those rooms sometimes, and especially in large metropolitan cities. But then you take a look at what happens with women. Thankfully, again, I said it's a small amount of cases for sexual assault, druggings that would happen. But there's also a whole other dark side where men get victimized, and end up getting drugged. And that was usually evolving around prostitution. For usually high-end, prostitutes that would work in hotel bars and look for single men travelers, and then go up to the room and they were slipped a Mickey, as the term was back in the day, and still use. They just use different drugs today to knock the person unconscious in the hotel room and rob them of their watches, their wallets, their laptops, everything of value. And of course, going back to that very small percentages when women are physically are targeted in hotels for sexual assault in different areas. And sometimes you'll see very sophisticated, very ingenious in their own mind criminals that would target women and then end up at their hotel room, find different ways. You'll find hot prowl burglars that would find different ways to get into rooms that are first, second floor rooms. But again, it's a very, very small amount. But it's interesting on how many women wouldn't know some of these acts and how they're committed and how to avoid some of these situations by learning. And again, that's kind of brought me into where I am today too.
And I think now, if ever, we're kind of asking for this, aren't we? Because I think the reality, and thank you for exploring that a little bit more with me, because yes, of course, theft is a major thing. And I want to get into that story of that specific business traveler, because I think it's really important to understand the stress around that and actually the impact that can have on that individual, but everything and everyone around it. But I didn't want to lose the fact, because you and I come together on so many different subject areas, but I know that accommodation, security and safety is massive for both of us. And we've both very publicly talked about the darker side of travel and business travel specifically as well, and actually how people can kind of get mixed up in stuff inadvertently. And unfortunately, ground transport and accommodation are still two of the kind of main areas that this happens. In reality, you perhaps should be safer in an airport because of all the security around it. But I think that's what also makes the work you do so prevalent, because perhaps are we not keeping our wits around us and we're not aware of the things that can happen. So hopefully we can touch on a little bit more around that as we go on. But let's go back to that traveller. So prior to that, I know we talked and you said that it was really common in LAX for layovers for people to go to Malibu Beach. And they'd leave all their stuff in the back of their car for a few hours, and then they come back and the car was broken into and everything was gone. So that was your kind of run of the mill. This is just happening all the time, annoying for people. And then one day this guy kind of comes in frantic and kind of actually explains the
Long-term
severity.
effects.
Yeah.
Long-term effects on what was going to happen that was outside this point that didn't have a clue to. I mean, this is hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of ramifications.
Yeah.
And this wasn't, yes, it was IP, but to a certain degree it wasn't. It was just the client, the buyer, had to make a decision and he couldn't see the information. So it was, you can just see where it comes across. And that's transferred even today. And when I writes, not too long after, as I mentioned, when I got the phone call to go on the Oprah show here in the United States, and then it rolled out to all the major talk shows here in the United States, Good Morning America, Today Show, CBS 2020 related, I started seeing the timing on how it would impact travelers and what I was doing then and to what I do today, because I still stay in contact with a lot of detectives I used to work with. I travel throughout the world and I visit with law enforcement in other cities and go out with their pickpocket squads and meet with them. And I do a lot of my filming that I do because I show a lot of videos in my presentations and I talk about for victimization to teach people how to avoid these. Hence, you look at my name, Travel Skills Evangelizer, because I've gone more into the training side now. But I had another one. I'll bring it back to real world. There was a case where it was on television here in the United States, and I talk about it. And there was a woman that got on board an airplane, and this is one of my biggest fears today, because we all have our own fears, right? I believe there's two types of luggage: lost and carry-on. I don't like to check my luggage. Anyone that travels a lot knows that, but even though when I do have to check my luggage on vacation and places where I go, I've rarely had a problem, but I just had one last year, but we'll get into that in a minute. But knowing that when I'm traveling on business and I'm going across the United States internationally and doing my speaking, I just travel with a carry-on bag. So I'm a 1K with United, so I'm fortunate, and that's only because it's not a badge of honor. It's a badge of just a lot of time away from my family when you have that status. But every time when I fly, I end up getting in boarding group 1. There's always space for my carry-on bag. It's not an issue. But if I fly other airlines, I fly American, I fly Delta, as far as these things. Sometimes depending where it is on the flight, if I end up in boarding group 4, 5, or 6, I get aboard that plane, there may not be room for my carry-on bag up above. And then what do they do with your carry-on bag if there's no more room? They have you do the infamous gate check. Like thousands of travelers do throughout the world every day, every hour in planes that are departing. So there was a woman recently, and she gets on board, and she has entire life is on her carry-on bag, and she gets on board the flight, and she goes in boarding group 4 or 5 and doesn't have room. They say you have to gate check, and they give you that little infamous elastic band with the identification number on it, and they give you the tag, and they say your luggage will meet you at the final destination. So she does that, and then she gets to her final destination, and when they do a gate check bag, especially on a larger aircraft, it doesn't meet you at the gate. It's sent all the way down into baggage claim, right? And depending, you're going through London, or you're going through Chicago, or you're going through Atlanta, I mean, that could end up being a 15-minute, carousel conveyor belt ride for that piece of luggage. It could be a ways for that luggage to get to where it's going. She gets to her final destination and her bag's not there. And she goes to make her report, but this is a very common, hence this is Travel Skills, what I do. The majority of travelers that I work with, talk to, and I do surveys for, they don't have their ownership information on their carry-on bag. They typically have it on their checked luggage, but not on the carry-on bag. So the only other thing, she has that little elastic band on there. So if that were to come off, which it did in her contacts on this case, is what she thought, how can the airline tell which carousel it needs to go to? There's no formal luggage tag that gets glued on that's very difficult to come off. So your bag could really be in a world of hurt. Well, what had happened, though, is that her bag did make it down there, or somehow in the transportation, but a dishonest airport employee stole her carry-on bag. And she didn't realize it, but in the frantic of her being told that you have to gate check your bag, many travelers don't sometimes give the second thought. My laptop's inside there, my iPad, my passport. You'd be surprised how many people put their passports in their carry-on bag and they forget to pull it out because they've already gone through the gate check and gone through
the ticket.
That goes inside there. And it wasn't until a week later where she had her Apple Watch was inside her bag. Thankfully, she had it on Find My, had it logged in, and it started pinging an address. And she actually went there. Not the best thing to do, but a lot of folks do this. Got local law enforcement and found out that it was a dishonest employee that worked at the airport that had stolen her bag. While my first case happened, many years ago, where someone was stealing that bag from that traveler, it's still happening today.
Yeah.
Thankfully, though, it's smaller numbers. Most travelers end up on their trip with no issues at all. I'm the first person to say that. The millions and millions of travelers, only a tiny percentage of travelers fall victim. And it's not typically an issue until it happens to you, right? Once it happens to you, especially at the beginning of your trip, especially if it's an international trip, your world is turned upside down.
Absolutely. And I think that it's happened to me a couple of times, but it's always been on the way back. And actually, within 24 hours, it's always got back to me. And it's always transatlantic, always been the US. And it's always been when I've had an internal flight before I then get onto the international flight. So there seems to be some weird patterns as to how it works. But I agree with you. It's this idea of all the different precautions that we can do. And obviously now with technology, as you were saying that story, that's not the same story as the girl in Florida, is it? Because I think she'd had a very similar experience and she tracked her luggage. And when they got to the airport employee's house, there were hundreds of cases in his house. It's the same one.
Yeah, it is. And I actually had a case many, many years ago at LAX airport where we had a prolific luggage thief, because in the United States, most airports, we no longer have positive claim check bag match, where you get your ticket when you check your bags and you'd have to show it to someone leaving the airport to match up the tag. They only do it at certain airports that have an extraordinarily high rate of bag loss, bag theft. Very few airports in the United States that still do that. Did a search warrant on a guy's house, and he must have had 80 bags in his spare bedroom that were all empty. And he would just make his life out of going to baggage claim and picking up people's luggage and walk right out. And then he would take it home, and he was actually going to the swap meet and selling all the items. And he actually, if it was high-end clothing, he would do it to high-end clothing resellers and doing this. It was fascinating when you look at some thieves, serial thieves.
Making a business, right? Oh, arguably, that's his business line. That's how he's doing it.
Absolutely. I had another guy that actually had stolen someone's luggage, and it was that of an airline pilot. And what he happened to do is that this guy then would dress up like an airline pilot, actually had the hat and everything, and he came into baggage claim, and his whole mantra and what he did is he stole golf clubs. So a lot of times, again, golf clubs miss flights and they do things. They're usually stacked up in the corner. And he would walk over, and who would just even give a second thought to someone dressed up like a pilot and walk over and pick up a set of golf club bags and walk out. And then he was selling these, and it was just amazing when you get some sophistication on some of these thieves and what they do. Same thing with thieves that steal laptops out of meeting and convention centers, out of meeting rooms, and
let's touch on that, Kevin, a little bit, if you don't mind, because I know that this is something you talk about a lot. And again, we talked about travel risk management, and we don't really allow it to touch. Meetings and events just seems to still sit in another silo, even when we're talking about corporate travel. So let's talk about that. I've been to conferences. I actually left my laptop on a plane on the way to a conference, which is extremely frustrating. But a nod to Turkish Airlines, after I had a total meltdown, they got it back to me during the conference. So they were amazing. But that was obviously me being stupid. It wasn't stolen, and that happens a lot. I'm quite sure that people. It
happens a lot. Don't feel awkward. I mean, this is life issues, right? And the majority of times things work themselves out.
Yeah.
All right. So if you take a look at the hotel meeting and event center space, it was interesting how I got into that, because as I was doing my television stuff back in my early years, and then large companies started hiring me to fly around the United States for oil and gas companies and auto manufacturer companies, and I would be brought in to speak at national sales meetings. And I still do that today. It's funny because I made a right turn and I worked for many years and worked in travel risk management, writing travel risk policies and procedures and checklists, and doing program assessments related, and associated with the likes of our fellow friend Bruce McIndoe and related, who I've known for over 30 years. But that's when I wanted to go back to my core, go back to training, because that's what I love doing. But so when I was doing these television appearances and getting hired by these large companies, flying around, I would be turned over to a meeting planner. And about my speech, and when I go on, what's my introduction, and my videos, and all this type of stuff. But, I usually fly in the night before. I would be invited to a dinner with a meeting planner or other related folks. And I would see mistakes these meeting planners would make during their preparation or right before the kickoff of the day. And I would say, have you thought about this or thought about that, or what about this? And they said, Kevin, no one's ever brought that up to me. So I come to find out many years ago that meeting and event planners, they get very little information when it comes to meeting and event risk. So I started doing presentations on that. And there's the association where, GBTA for global business professionals and travel managers and suppliers. I had been a member of theirs for years, and I was on the global risk committee. And just recently I termed out and went off that. What they have for that, and as is for security professionals, and I'm on the travel risk committee for that. MPI, Meeting Professionals International, worldwide organization, that's the equivalent of what we do. And so they started bringing me in to have me do meetings at their chapters and events throughout the United States. And I also work on their emergency preparedness course and do training on that, and help meeting professionals learn how to address risk for that, because that's a whole other Oprah that they don't think about, right? So it's opened up another door, and that's 100%. I think important. That's important for us as travel risk management professionals, the folks that, and this is why I'm actually doing this. And I know we're starting to hit the bottom of our time here for it, but I think this was very important for me as I look at where I am in my career. For me, it's there's a movie when people came to work for me as a detective. Back in the day, I had a DVD that I gave you to watch a movie, and the movie was called Pay It Forward. And I love the movie, and had Kevin Kline in it. And it's just all about doing things for other people that can't do anything for you. And I would give that to my detectives, saying, you need to watch this, because it's the epitome of what we're doing public services to help others. And that's what I'm doing today, is I love helping others identify some areas to help advance your career space and where you are and where you're going. So many folks in our space in TRM, and you and I know this, we've spoken about this weekly when we talk. They just focus on this one area they do. They flick switches and turn knobs. That's all I do. They do travel risk assessments for international travelers, but they don't broaden their perspective and their knowledge base and their education on what they can do to advance not just themselves professionally, but their organization they work for and support, to try to bring other departments and address other issues. Again, travel risk management is here, and that's, again, a very important silo, and that's most of my work I do. But the other 40% is on meeting an event, and that's touched by travel risk management.
So I think you're absolutely right. And again, I know that we've talked a lot about this evolving role of a travel risk manager, and actually kind of what that looks like. And we've spoken about how you kind of need to pull as many kind of different resources together as possible. So when we do these shows with you experts, it's always important for me to talk about your journey and how you got here, to obviously inspire others, because who would have thought that you were, a cop, and then you became a bit of a celebrity cop, and now look at you. Of course, that gave you the skills you needed to be able to present and to talk. But actually now this passion, it's kind of gone full circle, because it's back to that about protecting people and looking after people, but in this way of kind of giving it back to more travelers and to more people. That's where the soul is. But we know that for an organization, it's quite difficult to manage. And actually this idea of travel risk management, this new theme that we're sort of talking about, where does that sit? So when you talk to your meetings and event managers, or when you are going in to talk to travelers about about different things, or even travel risk managers, as you're now doing. Do you have sort of a framework or a kind of list of things that you provide them with or suggest that they do? I mean, let's ask this question. What makes a good travel risk manager in today's world, Kevin? I know that's hard, but what are we looking at to bring all of this stuff together? Can I ask you something like that? And then maybe that will...
Yeah. No, it can, but it's funny. Again, you and I are two peas in the same pod, right? We speak the same language. One of the things I think that makes, and I have to be honest with you, most of the time I don't work with a travel risk manager. Matter of fact, in the United States, there's very few organizations that have a full-time travel risk manager. That's all he or she does, right? Mm-hmm. Full-time. Majority of the folks I've worked with, they have other responsibilities. And I think it's similar across in Europe and in other parts of the world. There are some, though. And when that happens, you usually have two camps. You've got, someone in corporate security that wears that travel risk hat and 5 other hats. Or you've got the travel manager, and she or he wears that hat along with 50 hats that they wear in travel management. So when we come in, and when I come in, one of the first things I do, and I pride myself on like you do, is I really try, when I do that assessment of an organization, is I really try to look at what is the low-hanging fruit that they can use within their own organization to utilize all of the internal resources that they have, the other departments, the other department heads, to bring them together to truly identify how to support this travel risk management program using internal resources. And that I find is so lacking within organizations. And when I bring all the people together in a room, and you and I love to do this, we've talked about this several times, I can say things that the travel manager and the corporate security director, whoever is going to be at that table in that room, they can't say what I can say. And I can say, IT, this is typically what you should own. This is what other organizations have them own. This is HR, your responsibility. Training, this is your responsibility. Risk, this is your, and safety management. So I bring all these people, and I get very pointed in these conversations, but it really opens up the factor when the C-suite hears this, and they go, you're right, how come this department's not doing that? Kevin outlined that, but Bex, you can't say that when you're the travel manager.
Exactly.
So I love doing that and exposing those with these responsibilities, how to truly maximize the growth within their organization internally, which is many times not at great cost. Yes, it's going to be people cost, time, right? As far as that, taking people away from other jobs, but it's a job that fits in a round peg and a round hole. So I think that's always core for me. The other thing is I think that's important. And that's what you do. And that's why you and I have such a connection here. We're, another term I use, brothers from another mother, sisters, brothers and sisters.
Twins, kind of.
Yeah. Is that surrounding yourself with like-minded people and people that are smarter than you. And believe me, there's a lot of people that are smarter than I am. I'm still away. I learn every day. Every day I wake up, and I've always had a mantra. I had this at the department, LAPD. My mantra was, every day you got to learn something, every day you got to teach something. And I would make my staff come around my desk every day and share, what did they learn? What did they teach? How are they paying it forward? But that's the same thing with you and I, is that unless you're surrounding yourself with these people and learning how to expand your knowledge base, we're not advancing forward. And we are seeing a growth in TRM that we've never seen before. Bruce McIndoe, when he started this way back in the day, God love him. Now I associate with a group of about 10 professionals, and I highly recommend, as you do in the show, you talk about a lot of these people. Patrick Kane, very close friend of mine, we started the As Is Travel Risk Management Community together, similar but different from yours. GBTA has their risk committee. And now with you, with your Travel Risk Management Academy, and now you've got your awards, your qualifications, an area that was never really even talked about. Italy was the first one that started that. But now you've taken this now to a true global level and helping educate folks with professionals like myself that have made so many mistakes over the years that we can learn from. You learn from others' mistakes. I'm going to end with this because, I love to chat once I get going. I taught a course at LAPD in detective school, and I called it Detective Coffey's Mistake-Based Training Course. And I just focused on teaching younger detectives the mistakes I made. So they wouldn't make mine. No one likes to talk about their mistakes. And in my time, that's why I love working with you, because we talk about mistakes and we could have done this better or this is that better, and we learn from that. And that's what we do in our as is travel risk management community, and what you're doing in yours. And that's where the convergence of all of us together, I think, is important.
And this idea that if we learn together, we're stronger together, right? None of us are full experts in this space. What travel risk management looks like as a discipline is evolving, and all of us have a part to share and play in that if we want to come to the party and decide what that is in the future. So you've always been incredibly supportive of the work that we're doing in professionalizing travel risk management with the qualifications.
I'd like to touch on that, though, because that you are so key on this. And even, Patrick Kane, the chair of our committee, we talk about, he can run circles around me in certain areas that he does. He focuses on, he's with one of the very large commercial airlines there that does cargo and related and moves government. But his focus on travel risk management is very different than mine. Very, very different. We all have different silos, but we tend to stay in those. And that's, again, what I love what you do. And I love listening to your podcast that you have. But now going into your Travel Risk Academy, and that which you've put in place, you're one that we helped out on the recordings. But now with your words going from level 4 to level 5 and bringing in, bringing in these professionals in these specific areas that know so much more than I do, but we need to hear from. I think that's the game changer as far as I'm concerned. And I'm really looking forward to seeing where that's going to go with, 31030 and 31 for youth. All of these areas are being brought together by what you're doing and those within our network and our framework that we're associated with.
Thank you. And yes, certainly not just me, but thank you. I do appreciate it. We've got a huge community that we're creating. And I think what I've always recognized, and I think what was a homage to these podcasts when I first joined or got into travel risk management, was the volume of experience that was already there. And that's exactly what we're trying to embody by having these conversations, sharing our experience, because now we've got, I think we're up to like 70 plus episodes of incredible people that have all had incredibly different journeys into travel risk management. So look, we have gone over slightly. I knew we would, but you've done it absolute justice, Kevin. I have allowed you to just please talk, and I've been so honest. I've been so pleased that you have been so honest and really shared this journey with us. I had no doubts that it'd be an incredible conversation, but I've really enjoyed touching on the tips that you give, but also the why behind it. And I think that will mean a huge amount to our listeners to get to know a little bit more about you. So the man behind the Oprah show. So look, if we can give one more tip before we leave, is there anything else you would like to say?
God, there's so many. So we had spoken about this. I thought about this last night, and there's so many different areas. But for me, when I listen to your podcast, it's all about how can I grow from listening to other practitioners, right? That's what I look to your show for. And almost every time I listen to your show, I walk away with several nuggets, and I go, this is an area. And I got my big board here that has areas I should be looking at. And many of those areas has come from your podcast, by the way, and from your other practitioners that are way more knowledgeable than I am in certain areas. So with that, I'm going to wrap up with this, is that if you're in this space, and I don't care if you've been doing it like me for 30 plus years, or you're just starting and you're entry level and you've just been assigned into this TRM position at a company and you were an analyst and now you're taking on more, is open, as I say, open up the kimono, right? Do a self-assessment of yourself and be brutally honest and go, what do I really know about this topic? Where do I need to go to really become knowledgeable, where people turn to me and they go, this woman, this man they know what they're talking about. They're really trying to help the organization as a whole. It's not just about them. And do this assessment and turn to some practitioners like many of the folks on this call, yourself, me, Bruce, Patrick, and the names can go on and on and on. And many of us will reach out to you and help you and give you some ideas. I love giving guidance to more junior people in the skill set coming on board. and then take a look at the qualifications that you have, what you're doing. This whole cabinet behind me I've got over 100 books, every book on travel risk management ever written. And it's amazing when I talk to folks in travel risk management, I said, tell me the 3 top books that are out there on travel risk management, and have you read them? And be surprised how many people have never even heard of them before, even with 31030. So really taking a look at that self-assessment. And I know that's what you guys are doing on your awards and your levels there that you're working on for 4 and 5, for your courses that you're going to do for training. But I think if you do that, it's really going to take your career off in a whole other direction, make you a better person than what you are, help you financially because you're able to move up. You've probably seen a lot of the positions. I love to post travel risk management positions on my LinkedIn profile. I posted 3 of them yesterday. A lot of companies sometimes reach out to me and ask me to post it on the network because I have a lot of people that are disconnected with me. Matter of fact, I encourage you to go to my LinkedIn profile. Just don't follow me with me, connect with me if you're in travel risk management, and you'll see some of those jobs and take a look at them, what you and I do. And I think that'll help take you to the next level.
Kevin, thank you so much. There's so much there to digest. I think everybody, when they're walking their dogs and they're listening to this podcast this month, or in the gym doing that, I think just take breath and listen again, because there's just so much depth to this. But what it comes back to, as it always does, is it's about people. It's about looking after the people around us, and also having our own responsibilities in that and understanding what those responsibilities are. Kevin, it's been an absolute joy to be able to share your journey with our listeners. Thank you so much. I know I had to literally put your arm behind your back to do this. I'm so grateful.
You know, Bex, I'm going to give you one more thing, and I know you weren't prepared for this, but this is going to show what we're going to do. So, again, besides having a coffee with coffee, right? Tell you what, if any of your listeners, people that watch this podcast, if they reach out, make sure you put the email you'd like it to go to. I think you and I, we're going to create a one-pager of recommendations that you and I are going to put together, which doesn't exist now, but you and I are going to put this together. And if they email, you'll put the email in there, and they email you, and we're going to go ahead and set them up and send this one pager for the ideas you and I are going to put together. Some of the ones that I spoke about, do the self-assessment, to open the kimono, right? To really look at yourself, as I love to use humor here to try to advance you the next. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and give your audience something else as a little takeaway at no cost.
I love that, Kevin. Thank you. Okay, so watch this space. Kevin and I will come back to you with under the kimono of travel risk management, a personal self-assessment of what you may need to know if you're in these roles. Thank you so much for your time today. You have been listening to Talk'n TRM, the podcast, with an incredibly special guest and dear friend, Detective Kevin Coffey. Thank you so much, Kevin, and have a lovely day.